every single time, right? Like you just kind of catch that vibe and you keep going into it.
Yeah, like mellows you out a little bit.
It does, right?
Yeah.
You know, I like what we're doing here because today it's a Tuesday that we're recording. Last episode did a Monday. We've done Thursdays. We're kind of playing in line with what the NFL is doing right now with their scheduling, where it's like every single damn day they're going to do stuff now, right? It's crazy, man. What's up, everybody? Ricky Rains, your host, the Bow Body Show. As always, I appreciate you finding the time to come and spend a little time with us, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is. Alex, what's new in your world, man?
Nothing, just the same hectic stuff. I barely could get this in because we're signing contracts today for the bar that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Problem is, one of my business partners got COVID, so bunch of hectic stuff going on, but like nothing like bad. So I guess that's good.
Could be worse, right?
Yeah. What about you? I'm gonna be the nice North Carolinian. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thank you very much for reciprocating manners. How New York of you. No, I'm good, man. I've been working diligently to try to get some things prepared. We've got an awesome guest today that I'm super excited to ask a couple questions about. We're going to get into some draft prospects. And honestly, man, you know what? Instead of spending any more time on this, let's bring him right up. Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing good. Even better after that hype, that beat, man. It's like it's got the right amount of fiber to it. You know, I was over here bouncing around a little bit too. So
it's a little infectious, right?
Yeah, it is. You know, you kind of catch on. It percolates for sure. So
I feel like it's like one of the what was the Will Ferrell movie? Was it Blades of Glory, where he talks about it and he's like, I don't know what it is. It just gets the people going. It's provocative. You know, it's what it feels like, man. Ian, I appreciate you coming on, man. So you and I spoke briefly before we started doing this, and you got your start actually writing for a fan-sided entity, Rigo's Rag. That's the Commander site. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I started back there. I was in college, so it was like 7 years ago. I'm going through my head now. I'm 25 now, so I graduated 3 years ago with a marketing degree, actually. I was starting in business, and my part-time job was I was a fan-sided writer. I was a co-editor there, and I was writing for Washington because Kirk Cousins was there, and I'm in Michigan, so I was a big Kirk Cousins fan when he was in college, and I was writing for them, and PFN was a startup around the time, about 2 years into it, and I joined PFN as an editor, and then I started getting more responsibilities with that, and then on the scouting side, and it's all kind of cascaded to where it is now, which is full-time scouting, just kind of evaluating these prospects, rankings, reports, just the whole deal. So it's been quite a ride, but fan-sided was where it started. So to anyone out there trying to break in, you know, if you don't have any experience up there and just kind of getting your resume and kind of fulfilling that out, you know, it's a good way to do it for sure.
It's the grind of it, right? Like that's the thing that you gotta learn and get used to is, and I'm speaking from a standpoint of like, I write a few articles a month for Cat Crave, right? And now I do the podcasting and the draft evaluation stuff on my own time. But I can only imagine for you going through and doing all of these evals and having just a gigantic database. Are you always somebody that is like a glutton for punishment? Do you do this to yourself in every other aspect of life? Or is this simply like football is where you kind of hang your hat?
You know, sometimes I wonder, you know, sometimes I do, but, you know, I try to, you know, I do hold myself to a high standard, whatever it is, you know, this is my job at this point. Like I was very lucky, you know, PFN was coming up at the right time and I was ready for the opportunity at the right time. So, you know, you need a little bit of luck sometimes, but you also got to take advantage of those opportunities and be prepared when they come along. So, you know, it's a confluence of both things, but, it's been fun. You know, I try to hold myself to a high standard whenever I'm off the clock, you know, because you get football overload sometimes, you know, and especially if you're scouting all day, you know, so I try and I coach tennis too, so I do that. That's fun. And, you know, I just do music sometimes too, but whenever you're off the clock, you try and decompress a little bit and then get right back into it when you're on again.
Now, when you say music, you mean that you make your own music?
Occasionally, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a side thing, you know, just decompressing again. But it was something that I grew up with, and I kind of stuck with it. So
I love it, man. That is awesome. The multi-dimensional draft analyst, Ian Cummings. That's impressive, man.
Yeah, dude. I played tennis in high school. I was top 16 in state with my doubles team.
Okay.
And I do karaoke sometimes, so we're kind of like the same person.
I know, right, dude? Honestly, the synergy. I love it. I love it.
Look at you guys, man. You guys look exactly alike. You have all the same interests. Like, it's impressive, man. Good for you guys. Ian, I wanted to ask you about the mock draft simulator.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, it's gigantic, right? And it's basically you guys against PFF at this point. I know the Draft Network had their simulator that was pretty popular. I don't know if anyone read any of the recent articles that have come out about the Draft Network. I won't touch on that too much. But you guys have pretty much cornered the market with PFF as far as like legitimate, most used, most frequented draft simulators. But there's a huge discrepancy in like y'all's rankings and PFF's rankings and the way that those go. Can you talk a little bit about how, like, are the rankings all based off of your draft evals, or is there any kind of input from sources, what you hear, right? A feeling from league sources, team sources, anything like that, where you get inclinations on what is a likely outcome?
Yeah, so I'm not very plugged in individually as it stands. I just kind of do my evaluations behind the scenes. What do I see, right? So that's kind of where it factors in. But you know, it's the misinformation season. Like, you hear a lot of things and you see a lot of things. Like, at this point, we know JJ McCarthy is probably going to be a top 10 pick, right? Like, that's one example.
Crazy.
He doesn't grade as a top 10 prospect for me personally, but that's where that disconnect comes in with the MDS. So a lot of it, I think, especially for day 2 and day 3 guys, my evaluations take a little more weight because, you know, like Dadrian Taylor Demerson, Texas Tech, we were talking about him. I'll provide him as an example. He was one where he was in the day 3 range initially. Then I get my scouting report on him. I run the grades. Like, you know, I really don't think there's anything keeping him from going day 2, right? So then you move up a little bit based on your grade and everything. I never want it to be my grade solely because I'm human. I can make mistakes, right? You know, I want there to be some cross-checking, and my guy Kent Lee Platty, Math Bomb on Twitter, he's the mastermind behind the MDS. He's such a great worker. He does so much great work with it, and you know, all the algorithms behind it. That's him, right? So we always collaborate with rankings, and we'll have a feedback process. But for those day 2 and day 3 guys, the evaluations take more center stage. But I also want to factor in gamification for a guy like JJ McCarthy, where he's more of a top 25 guy for me. But if he's probably going to go top 10, I want to do my best to give the user a realistic outcome that they can work with. So it goes hand in hand. That's kind of the thought process. You want evaluations to underpin your thought process, but you also want to be open to different perspectives and like the outcomes.
Love it. Yeah, that's I struggle when I run those mock draft simulators, man. Where I struggle the most is trying to do the fun version of it, right? Like picking my guys and going nuts and having it be the most unrealistic but awesome thing in the world. Like Xavier Worthy falls to 65. Oh yeah, pick him up. But I know that he's not going to be there. But then the other fold of it is you can use that as an actual tool. Like if you're an analyst or an evaluator or anything like that, you can look at these simulators and get a feel for where like a ballpark range for some of these prospects might be, so that you can start structuring a little bit more about how you actually see this unfolding. And maybe that even plays into a little bit of your individual ranks. Do you think that that's a fair way of going about using the simulator in a real way?
I think, in a certain sense. For me personally, the MDS and my thought process that I input into the MDS flows off my rankings. So it doesn't usually circle back. But you mentioned Xavier Worthy, like falling to 65. Like, you're probably not going to. But the whole point of the MDS is to explore different outcomes. And if there's a 0.01% chance that this prospect might fall to this spot, wouldn't you want the MDS to reflect that in 0.01% of the outcomes? Yeah, you would, right? So, you know, it's one of those things where it's very tough to block something off completely. And as we get closer to the draft, we are going to start exploring prospect floors for guys like Brock Bowers. That was one example. We put in a hard floor for him at 15 to the Colts. Like, if he gets to the Colts, probably not going to get past them because he's a great fit. You know, the talent kind of warrants that selection. So for certain prospects, we do input floors, but you want the MDS to be a tool that explores different outcomes. The board is going to fall a different way every single time, and that allows you to keep running through simulations and keep looking at what's going to happen to your pick. For the Panthers, it's especially alluring because you got the 33rd pick, right? You know, ideally you'd have that first overall pick, but even at 33, especially in this class, it's a really good chance that a first-round prospect or first-round talent will fall to you.
Right. I like that. And you know what, man? You kind of gave me a little bit of a segue. Let's get into some Panthers prospects.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We'll start all the way over here. This is a polarizing name right now, man. In Panther circles, this guy, like, for some reason, I really think it's the 40, man. That 4.61 40 at the combine, I think, is just so glued and ingrained in people's heads that they ignore all of the highlights in game film of Keon literally running away from folks, right? Like, in the game, and I'm not saying that he has, like, Xavier Worthy speed. I'm not even saying that he has Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk. I'm not saying that he has that speed. But to say that he's Kelvin Benjamin is the thing that keeps getting brought up. And I think it's the helmet, right? He's a Florida State player. The Panthers don't like, or the Panthers fans have bad taste over Kelvin Benjamin, even though he had a very productive rookie year and was met with a lot of adversity. Alex, you all good over there, bud?
Yeah. I got like 95 things on my not even desk. It's like my little girl's clothes. What do you call it? Dresser drawers, because of course she needs more clothes than me and my wife combined. So that's where I'm doing this, and it does not act as a good desk. So
I saw the camera shake. I was like, oh,
yep.
What's going on?
All it shakes, I heard the noise, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was safe before we moved on.
I'm like, why does she need so many clothes? She's 3 months old. Go ahead.
Man, get used to it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Get used to it. So I want your opinion, though, man. What do you think about Keon Coleman? Because when I watch him, I see a very fluid athlete. The way that he was a punt returner, the way that he was used at Michigan State, I think, is also critical in coming up with a fair evaluation with Keon, because I don't think that the way that he was utilized at Florida State is the only way that you can use Keon Coleman. When you watch him, what is your evaluation on Keon?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we see this effect every cycle where the numbers come out and it kind of reinforces some kind of conclusion, right? And then helmet scouting as well, right? Like, that's one reason I try to avoid same school comps, because the human mind, like, actually, it's a type of bias. We associate those cosmetic similarities, and that in turn, like, you'll see guys comp Drake May to Sam Howell for that exact reason, right? Or
right.
To Justin Fields back in the day. Like, those cosmetic similarities will guide your brain to those guys. So you want to try and avoid that. You want to have an awareness of it. So same school comps, just a no-go for me. I try to go outside of that. But, even looking beyond that, I think with Keon Coleman, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think looking at the return ability that he has, and I think looking at his athletic profile, yeah, he ran a 4.61 40-yard dash. But first off, I think the game speed is a lot faster with him. And that was something that his gauntlet drill showed. Like, hey,
right.
Any speed, he's catching every single pass. He's very good at gathering the ball away from his frame, sturdy diamond technique, creating that diamond with his hands. He's very good at doing that, securing it, and then gathering off field, resetting his feet for rack. And then also just the athleticism in the short range, right? Like Kelvin Benjamin, a little bit more lumbering of an athlete, right?
Right.
Coleman, he's got great explosiveness, man. He's got great agility and fluidity. Like, I think that part of his game is really strong. You saw him separate on split diamond releases off the line, right? His ability to work stems with that agility and fluidity and bend is very impressive too. So one of those guys who's not going to blow you away on the vertical plane 40, 60 yards out, but he's explosive enough to stress defensive backs. And then once he gets to know those one-on-one situations, he's an alpha at the catch point too. So I look at what he can do with the catch point with his hands, his play strength, his coordination, and just his authority as a playmaker, and then his agility, his contact balance, his explosion. I really think you have a 3-level weapon here, and I think there are very promising flashes of route running nuance too. So he's in my wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8 range. Jalen Polk is there too, and we'll get to him later. But I like him a lot. He's still a fringe first-round guy.
So I think you touched on one thing that I do want to mention, and it's the off-the-line acceleration, right? That's where I really think that sometimes fans hear keywords, right, about no separation, not a good route runner, and they kind of buy into it without doing a little bit of checking on our own. But when you watch him, he's got good get off the line, right? Like he can create separation early. He's got good release. Now, in the intermediate range is where I really think that he is being devalued and where he's going to really be able to make his bones in the NFL, because it's such a critical part of being that 3-level receiver, right? And being a wide receiver 1 at that next level. I see enough separation for him. But do you think that there are issues separation-wise for him at the next level? Or is that mainly just on these deep plays because he doesn't have that long speed?
I think because he doesn't have the long speed, your margin for error is shortened a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have a faster corner, he's going to be able to outrun you off the line and eventually kind of suffocate you against the boundary, right? So if you're Keon Coleman, a lot of those routes, kind of taking the top off the defense, right? Those 9 routes, those goes, seam routes, maybe that part of the route tree isn't going to be as expansive for you. So you do need to expand, I think, in the intermediate range with digs, with outs, with corners, comebacks, and things like that. And on those specific routes, I think his plant and drive footwork can be a little more efficient sometimes. I think there's still room for him to improve his down-to-down consistency. But whenever I have a prospect that needs to improve that, I look for the building blocks. I look for the stopping ability, the ability to extend your strides and then decelerate very quickly, chop your feet, retract and kind of halt your momentum. And then also I look for the spatial IQ at steps, using a DB's leverage against him, targeted physicality to compound that separation. I think you see glimpses of all of those things on Keon Coleman's tape, which is why I'm a little more bullish on the developmental potential, because all the pieces are there. Just got to put it together. And in the immediate timeline, you can scheme him touches as a rack threat. He can separate on quick slants and get over the middle of the field. He's got really strong hands. And then as red zone threat, there's a lot of appeal there too. So I think there's a way to weaponize him early on. And all the route running building blocks are there. Combine that with the athletic profile, the fluidity, the burst, the agility, the foot speed. I think you have all the makings of that kind of player. You just need to kind of see that development through to the next level.
I like that. You make a good point too about his immediate impact that he can have. And I think for the Panthers specifically, you look at signing Deontay Johnson, right, in that trade. Deontay Johnson could be that technician and that quick separator and handling all of that. And then you can have a threat like Keon Coleman on that boundary at an X position that honestly we just don't have on the roster. Let's go. I'm going to skip over Polk real quick because I want to give him his shine here.
Yeah.
But when we talk about Coleman, you can't really go in Panthers Twitter without talking about Coleman and Xavier Legette at the exact same time. Like, it's just, I don't know that it's even possible to do that. What are your thoughts on Xavier Legette? Because I know a lot of people think that he's got the 1 year production. He's compared to Jonathan Mingo for no good reason, but that's what people say. But I see a very explosive guy. I see a very dynamic receiver. By all accounts, he is an extremely hard worker. First guy in, last guy out. He's had incredible adversity throughout his personal life, throughout injuries. What do you think about Xavier Legette?
Yeah, I think, it's difficult. Like you said, a lot of adversity that he went through. And I think that's one thing that needs to be brought up when people talk about the late breakout, because the late breakout is such a big talking point every year with prospects, especially on the fantasy side. And I don't want to shade any fantasy analysts. Like,
sure.
You'll see the film analytics debate, Ray John, every cycle. I think you need a little bit of both to paint a full picture of the prospect. With that being said, he lost both of his parents, I think, pretty, relatively close within a few years of each other. A motorcycle accident as well. So, he's had to work through a lot to get to where he is. So I don't hold the late breakout against him because of that. I think you look at the tape, purely from a size speed perspective. Yeah, Jonathan Mingo is one of the first names that comes to mind because he's 6'1", he's 220. He's a bowling ball, man. It's just like that. That kind of play strength, that compact mass, you really don't see it very often at the wide receiver position. And then the explosiveness too, running a 4.39 40-yard dash. That speed shows up on tape. I think he eclipsed 23 miles an hour at one point, running up the boundary on a screen. So he gets up to speed very quickly, and then once he gets to that speed, he's like a freight train. It's very tough to stop him and
get the hell out of his way, right?
Exactly.
Like I can't imagine a whole lot of defensive backs that would see him barreling towards them and say, "Yeah, no, I'll try this." Right?
Exactly. Like, it's one of those things. Like, I'm getting out of the way, man. I'm ducking and running. So it's like
making business decisions left and right when Xavier Legette's in front of him.
Exactly, man. That's a lot of momentum. That's a lot of mass inertia coming your way. You don't want to deal with the physics of that for sure. And I think that South Carolina offense left some meat on the bone in the rack perspective too. I think there's ways for him to be weaponized there. But comparing and contrasting with Mingo, because that is a popular comparison, just athletically, I think Legette is a better route runner than Mingo was coming out. I think Legette has really good blind spot awareness and bend, so he's able to utilize his speed well, bending past blind spots into soft spots in the zone, and then capitalizing with his stride retraction ability too. I think there's still room for him to improve that, but I do think, on the vertical plane especially, that route running, that zone awareness and the IQ is really good with him. I think the one thing that's kind of a separator between him and Coleman for me, Legette's my wide receiver 10, Coleman's my wide receiver 8. Legette is more of a vertical athlete. On the lateral plane, doesn't have great agility. He can be a little stiff in the hips sometimes. I think he's good enough to expand his route tree a little bit, but I do wonder, on sharp digs and curls, how well is he going to be able to execute that against NFL defensive backs who can click and close in an instant? So, that's my main concern with him. I think the hand technique can be a little inconsistent too, but overall, his instincts, his ability to work beyond his frame, contort for passes and snare them, and again, that catch point authority, I think he's got that too. So, size, speed athlete with a lot to like. It's just with him, I wonder how expansive the route tree is going to be. But that's not a huge issue because I still think, there is a decent route tree for him with those vertical concepts, using bend, seam routes, nines, and then some slant, drag, mesh utility as well. So I still think there are plenty of ways to utilize him and weaponize his full skill set.
Alex, what do you think? If you had to go with Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette, who do you lean there? And I'm not saying comparing them as players, but let's say it's pick 33 or 39, either one, and they're both on the board. Which way are you going if you're the Panthers?
Yeah, I like. So my first choice was Legette because I kind of compared him to DK a little bit. As far as DK was a 4-3 guy, same kind of vertical, same kind of bowling ball coming down downhill at you. But then Keon Coleman kind of reminds me a little about Mike Evans. Not the fastest guy in the world, but he'll win almost every jump ball. And I kind of want to go Coleman because I think Bryce needs that trusty jump ball guy. Because think about all the I don't want to say drops because they weren't drops, but what
a lot were drops.
DJ Chark, he just wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy that could high point this ball. And think if he made half of those catches. A lot of those offensive drives keep going. And I think Bryce needs that jump ball kind of guy. I don't know if that's a good comp for you, Ian, but that's kind of how I differentiate them a little bit.
The comp that I had in mind for Legette, and I try to go back in time a little bit with comps if I can, because people try to force modern ones so often, and it was really difficult to find one with his size, speed profile. And admittedly, this one isn't perfect, but David Boston is one that came to mind for me. Size, speed profile, a little bit more of a vertical guy, a little stiff in the hips, but still, I think just the ability to out-muscle guys. He can win on slants and quick routes like that, and then the explosiveness, the catch point authority again. Because I mentioned his hand technique, he can improve it at times. There are times where he'll bobble the ball, but he still had one of the lowest drop rates in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still got really good hands there too. So the play strength, I think David Boston is a pretty good high-end comp. And that I remember he had one All-Pro season where he just unleashed. He had some injuries after that, but that's kind of your ceiling if you can get that. It's a long way to go, but I like what you're working with. And then Keon Coleman, I don't know, I still have to hammer out a comp for him. I was looking at Michael Thomas as a similar athletic profile. I think if he can refine his route running, you could maybe get 75% of that, 80% of that. I think the separation ability is where he stands to expand. But again, you're looking at a 4.61 guy who's still got really good size, really good play speed and pace, and then has enough spatial awareness and foot speed, and again that lateral correctiveness to expand that tree. I think those are some high end comps for those guys. Obviously, you have mid range and low range too, but I try to be optimistic when I'm thinking about these guys, and that's kind of what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about those are what kind of guys they're going to be. I was talking about in a Canales system, how he would use those guys. Just to be clear, I don't want to say that one's DK and one's Mike Evans.
You don't want that. You don't want that kind of smoke.
Yeah, everybody's going to come after me. But
just said he's DK Metcalf.
Yeah. Of course, everybody's going to come after me for something.
Well, hey, look, you mentioned Alex. You just mentioned needing a jump ball guy, a sure-handed guy, a reliable, fiery competitor, right? And that's what Bryce Young needs. I got an answer for that.
Yeah,
Lynn Polk, man. Ian, so this is kind of where the idea of me approaching you to come on and talk draft prospects originated for me in my head. Was my colleague over at Cat Crave, Jared Feinberg, was talking to me because I was saying, man, I'm out on an island right now. I've got Jalen Polk as my wide receiver 6. I'm extremely high on him. I see so much, man, honestly, that just looks like it wins in the NFL. There's a lot of comps with like Puka Nacua, and there's so much of intrigue of, man, we just want to find the next Puka, right? I think when people say that, they mean they want to hit in the 5th round with an 1,000-yard performer in his rookie season. I don't think they actually talk about the play style and the player and what he brings. Because if that was genuinely what you wanted, I think you're looking at Jalen Polk really closely in this draft. I think that, and I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing it, but I kind of workshop these weird analogies in my head to make more sense of things. You look at it like there's like clothing, right? Like, look, Alex is already making fun of me.
I think I have the weirdest analogies.
But I look at it from a
guys, not a competition.
Yeah, no, there is no competition. Alex wins that all day. But I look at it, man. I'm like, oh, look, we all know like Old Navy, Gap, and Banana Republic are all the same brand, right? But they're different levels of what they are. I look at Puka and I say, you got him in the 5th round. That's an Old Navy shirt, right? Because you got him in the 5th round. It's a budget, man. Like you got him for cheap. But some Old Navy shirts, man, will wear for 15 years and it'll become your favorite damn t-shirt. Then you got like a Banana Republic that's, man, it feels better when you wear it. Like you can tell that it's got a little bit better manufacturing to it. You can tell it's made with a tiny bit higher cotton threads, right? You can just tell there's a tiny difference, but they're still the same thing and they're made from the same place. Jalen Polk is like my Banana Republic Puka Nacua. And I don't think that they necessarily play the exact same style, but when you watch them in college, Puka, I mean, he did everything, man. He had alignment versatility. They used him out in screens. They manufactured touches for him. He had sure hands. He was a reliable blocker. He wanted to block. He took pride in it and was fiery in it. And that's some of my favorite clips from Jalen Polk are where you see him just take somebody out in run blocking and he's over there just jacked himself up. The play is over, but he's screaming at himself because he just knocked dude to the ground. You know, I love that. So his superpower for me is his ability to fully extend and make acrobatic catches away from his frame and be a reliable deep threat target, despite the fact that he doesn't have this crazy burner speed or anything like that and these elite separation skills. He's got strong hands and late hands, got that on the graphic in front of us. And a lot of people will recall DJ Chark in Carolina was praised for his late hands. That's one of the things that Sean Jefferson, the wide receiver coach, really praised him about because it doesn't give a tell to the defenders of when that ball is coming. Jalen Polk exemplifies that to me. You will see him, he'll carry a defender with him, and then at that last minute, he's up and he's fully extended and he makes the catch. What is it about Jalen Polk, Ian, that you are so incredibly high on?
I mean, you pretty much just listed all of it. So it's like I could just retweet and move on. No, yes. I'm a big fan of his too. He's my wide receiver 7. It's him and Coleman kind of in a similar tier for me. But yeah, you mentioned it. And the Puka comp is one that I don't love successive year comps because the guys in the previous class, they tend to be at the forefront of our minds just naturally. So there is a little bit of an inclination to say, oh, this guy reminds me of this guy from the very last class. Like, no, I want to try and spread out a little bit, but I just look at, everyone, like you said, everyone's looking for the next Puka. And to me, it's not a guy not necessarily a guy who can come in the 5th round and play like that. It's a guy who, in the right scheme, can really emerge because you look at I wonder if he had the same output without Sean McVay because Sean McVay Puka was incredible as a rookie. Like, let's not get that twisted. But Sean McVay, I think, was the perfect offensive mind to maximize that alignment versatility that you mentioned, and then also just he just converts the catch point. You give him a ball, he's going to take it, and he's going to win against the DB. Right? There were so many reps where Puka will run a dig route or a crosser off a motion, and then he doesn't have a ton of separation, right? He's not a 4-4 burner either, but it's positioning late in the rep, and then he has the hand strength to haul that ball in, even as it's being contested, right? So it's about alignment versatility, all-encompassing alignment versatility, being utilized off motions in the slot, on the boundary, on drags and crossers, and any type of route, and then also just the strong hands to convert, right? And Jalen Polk, to me, embodies all of that. I think you look at his tape, for me, the fluidity as a route runner, right? I think his route tree, there's still a few routes where he can improve a little bit, the execution.
For sure.
But the fluidity and the redirection freedom, the bend, through stems and around DBs past their blind spots. That's all there for him. And then one thing that's really impressive, he tested very well in the explosiveness drills. And I think that shows tape where
his broad jump.
Yeah, he's going at like 80% using his bend to get around a DB. And then all of a sudden he'll throttle up, get that late snap separation with that explosiveness. And that's all the space he needs to make that catch, right? And it's a tough catch. The DB's right behind him, but he's got his hand strength is just so reliable. His hand-eye coordination is so reliable. He's going to convert that too. And the late hands is something that you see from Roma Dunze as well. I think guys are just really well coached and just they have really great feel in that aspect of it. But Jalen Polk is not averse to making those contested catches and controlling the catch points. So I just think the way, Puka isn't an overwhelming size guy. Like he's got enough, right? Like around over 200, 32 inch arms, like Polk, right? It's enough size to box guys out, and then you utilize that length to gather passes away from your frame. So I think, I've been struggling with this. It's kind of a moral quandary for me. Is it responsible to make a Puka comp a year after he had a record-breaking season? Part of me says no, but part of me says if there's any wide receiver in the 2024 NFL draft who fits the Puka profile, it's Jalen Polk, right? And so I think if he gets in the right scheme, I really think you can weaponize this guy in a similar way. He can convert on third downs in the red zone, rack, wherever you need him to, and just be an all-around utility piece. So I don't want to say it's 100% responsible, but I do think there's an avenue to say he fits the Puka profile and he can be that kind of guy.
The best news for you right now, man, is that on this show we don't do anything 100% responsibly. So it is perfectly okay to just throw the care to the wind and just go for it here. I'll say something even more irresponsible. When I was trying to go through comps, because I do the similar thing as you, where I like to go back a little bit in time so that there's not this recency bias and make like an easy or lazy comp. But when I looked at the criticism for Polk, coming out, there was a lot of, the scheme that he played in at Washington, the players around him, and he had kind of like the route running wasn't necessarily his best highlight. Like there was a little bit of simplicity. Maybe there was a little bit more depth that he needs to attain to reach that next level at the NFL. His size, his length, his lack of elite speed, but his great ability to bring in catches and be a sure-handed, strong-handed, full extension guy is eerily reminiscent to Devontae Adams out of Fresno State. They both were about 6'2", 210-ish, I think was where Devontae was at the combine when he came out. But he was criticized for that Fresno State offense, saying, man, he's just asked to do simple things. He's not asked to do a whole lot. We don't know how he's going to turn into as a route runner. And now he's one of, if not the most prolific route runner in the NFL. And I'm not saying that that's Polk, that he's going to get to that standpoint. I'm saying that he has what we talked about earlier with Keon Coleman, is that when you look at it, he's got that same, the bones are there, right? Like all of the foundation for becoming really, really good is there. And when I'm ranking these prospects and grading them, I'm looking for someone that I can already tell you is going to be a good football player, but that has the ability to be a really great football player. And I feel that way about Jalen Polk almost more than anybody in this class. Maybe Roma Dunze would be there, right there with him as far as like a already going to come in. Marvin Harrison Jr., man, I don't even talk about. Whole different level of football player. But I'm just really excited that somebody else thinks that Jalen Polk is a stud.
Yeah,
Alex,
I think the main thing too is Sean McVay was able to implement Puka immediately because he had that comfort with the verbiage and terminology and the offense and all those things. And you see Polk take reps from just about anywhere, motions from just about anywhere. He can block off of those or run a variety of routes off of those motions. That kind of integration, seamless integration is another thing that allowed Puka to hit the ground running. I think he hit one of, I don't remember if he broke a record his first week, but he had like 15 catches or something, which might have been the most for a rookie in his debut. Like I don't know if Polk is going to hit that level, but I do think day one, if you have a vision for him, he can do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, maybe the production doesn't match, right? Maybe like the right away production impact doesn't match. But I think that what he brings to a team and the sure-handedness and the I'll do whatever you ask and I'll do it really well, I think that's just why I'm as excited about Jalen Polk. He's just, he plays like he's like everything is his, right? Like he deserves it all. That's the way that he plays, and I love that attitude. Alex, do you have a favorite prospect, man? Because I feel like when we talk about this, you're always like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Keon Coleman for me, of all of them. But so it's what have you done and what are you saying? So what he's done, he's had a DK type player, he's had a Mike Evans type player, and with Hulk, it kind of feels like it's more about what he's saying. And when people talk, listen, he seems more of that timing guy that he's preaching. Like he's saying that everything's going to be about timing. Everything's going to be about it. We need this much time in the pocket. We need this much. So if you want a timing guy, I think that Hulk is the one that you want of the three. But I think my favorite, just for Bryce specifically as a second-year player, would be Keon Coleman. But I wouldn't hate any of them because I would understand more about why they took him than the player themselves.
Sure. What about Xavier Worthy? I don't know that he'll last to 33. I highly doubt it. Usually when a guy runs the way that he did and he has the production that he's had for three years in college, which his breakout came as a freshman too, right?
Yeah.
Usually when you look at that kind of stuff, that type of player doesn't make it out of the first round. I also don't think that typically that kind of player has a 165-pound frame. So there's a little bit of a question there on, does that stop him from being a high investment pick for teams? But when I watch him, man, he doesn't look like just a John Ross thin-framed speedster that can just run a straight line. I think that he's got a lot of nuance to his route running. His athletic testing at the combine showed that he absolutely can elevate and has explosiveness to him, and that he can make a little bit tougher catches than I think his statistics will lead you to believe in, as far as the contested catch rate and percentage. Your thoughts on Xavier Worthy? Is he a first round guy, or is he a potential landing spot at 33 for the Panthers?
I think he's a potential landing spot at 33, but I also think he's a first round guy. I think the weight adds a level of variance to it that you don't normally see, because he's going to fall outside some teams' thresholds, and maybe that causes him to fall, right? So I think if you're looking at the potential variance, it's a little bit higher for him. That said, I agree completely with you. He's my wide receiver 6, and honestly, if you factor in some of the effort questions that A.D. Mitchell has been fielding, A.D. Mitchell has all the talent in the world. He's a phenomenal route runner. He's got great size, speed. But if you factor in some of the effort questions that have been looming a little bit, you could make an argument for Worthy to be wide receiver 5 too. So they're neck and neck for me. And Worthy, to me, is so exciting because he's got that generational speed, 4.21 speed. It shows up on tape. Like, it's different for sure. You can tell when it's different. It's different. But then he knows how to use it. He will press into stems. He's got really good stride retraction ability. Like, some guys, when they have that speed, they get a little uncontrolled. It's really tough for them to manage their throttle on the vertical plane. He can press into stems and snap back at a moment's notice and bang and kind of pinch really tight angles on out routes and corners and just leave defenders in the dust, put them on a string. So I love that part of his game. He's an elite speed guy, but he knows how to use that speed too. And then you look at him on the vertical plane down the field, his ball tracking ability, his contortion, both very high level parts of his game. I think there are still some focus drops at times. I think he can improve that, but I do think he improved a little bit. And it's not so much a hand technique issue for me as it is just a focus thing. So I'm hoping more work with the jugs machine should help with that, right? But you mentioned it too. Like, he's a competitor. Like, he will absorb hits after the catch. Like, he will kind of keep the chains moving, his legs churning, and he's got some blocking. He's got energy.
He does, man.
Right? Like, I don't want to, bank on him having to rely on him as a lead blocker.
Not at all. Right.
He's a guy who's actually, he's going to give it his all, right?
But he's going to do it, man. Like, that's one of my favorite parts about, like, watching him. I never anticipated seeing this slight frame guy barreling into defenders to try to get the extra 3 yards. Like, you've got all the twitch and speed in the world. Yeah. And instead of trying to move around these guys, he's like, oh, hell no, I'm going to go right through that safety. I love that. I love the attitude, the mentality of it.
And I do Devontae Smith to him with that wiry play strength. My comp for him is Henry Ellard. who was back in the day, very productive.
Ellard, look at you.
Here's the thing with Henry Ellard, man. I think he was around 5'11", so Xavier Worthy measured a little bit under 6 foot, 5'11", but he was a long strider, man, and he had that speed. I think the movement patterns were really similar too. Again, that twitchy, you got that vertical speed, and you can really stress vertically, but you've got that movement freedom where you can put DBs on a string and stress them laterally just as much as vertically. Really solid body control and ball tracking again, and then some rack element to it too. And he actually made the All-Pro team 1 year as a kick returner, I believe. And I think Worthy has that ability too. So for me, it all boils down to an elite speed guy who knows how to use that speed as a route runner, and then also has that feisty competitive mentality that you want. I think he can have a really long career, not just because of his speed, but his ability to separate and be that weapon.
Yep, I agree. I love too that you mentioned his tracking ability. That's something that I think I meant to talk about with Jalen Polk as well. I think that Xavier Worthy and Jalen Polk are two of the best ball trackers in this class. I think that they both just have an innate ability, especially with the over-the-shoulder catches, where the late hands for Polk plays such a big part in that too, with his ability to track and then not tip it away to the defender about when he's making that play. But Xavier Worthy, it's his like shifting gears with absolutely no let up when he does it, right? Like they're both really good at pacing their routes so that they kind of keep their defenders really off schedule, man. Like it's really hard to predict what these guys are going to do. And then when they make that decision, they go, man. Like they've got that get up where they just take it to the next level. Yeah, I love that. If he were there at 33, I would have a hard time. Xavier Worthy is my wide receiver 5. Jalen Polk is my 6, and then Adonai Mitchell is my 7. So they're all in that same group for me too.
I think it's just a matter of what you want for Bryce Young.
That's right.
At the end of the day, right? Because Xavier Worthy, as great as he is, right? For Bryce Young, I would want a guy who can separate a little bit quicker. And I'm not saying Worthy can't separate quickly in the short range, but you want to use him on the vertical plane, right? That's where he can be so
when
deadly.
He gets up to speed. Yeah,
exactly. And I think, I look at a guy like maybe Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette or Jalen Polk. Maybe they're a little better working the middle of the field, making themselves available for Bryce Young in those windows where, hey, he's a very talented prospect, but his arm strength and drive velocity was one of the concerns coming out. I think that may limit him a little bit on the deep third. You want to get the ball out of his hands quickly. You want him to be that point guard and Dave Canales' offense. And I think those quicker, those utility options in the short and intermediate range might be a little bit better for you. But if you want a speed guy to here's the thing, Xavier Worthy, you might not be able to maximize his ability on the vertical plane with Bryce Young, but at the same time, if he can stretch defenses thin, that opens up space underneath for other guys too.
Absolutely.
So, there's a kind of feedback loop for you. So it's really interesting, the different pros and cons for each one.
Yep, I agree completely. So, speaking on offense, before we go to the defensive side of things, and I think I have one more offensive prospect, but we'll talk about some edge rushers and corners. Centers, man, this is a hot button thing for me too, because I'm a huge Zach Frazier guy, and I would invest pick 33 on Zach Frazier if he was there, depending on who else was around on that board. Like I said, if Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell was there, it would be difficult to pass up, or a Keon Coleman would be really tough with the position that this wide receiver room is in right now in Carolina. It'd be really hard for me to overlook one of those dynamic talents. But I think Zach Frazier, I'm not even positive he's going to be there at 33, to be completely honest, man. I think that if he hadn't had that leg injury to end the season, I think that he would very much be talked about in a very similar regard as Jackson Powers Johnson. I think he's exactly the kind of center that you want. He's built for this, the wrestling history, the tenacity that he plays with. He's a good mover. I like the squatty build that he has too. I do, after maybe it's just a little bit of PTSD from Bradley Bozeman here as our center, right? That had a little bit of playing high and it had pad level issues and not being a great mover on those pulls and things like that in a zone scheme. Out of these three, Zach Frazier is clearly the superior prospect. Do you think that it would be wise to invest, for the Panthers standpoint, invest in like a wide receiver, edge, corner, skill player, and then look at a Bo Limmer or Tanner Bortolini or maybe a Matt Lee or somebody else, in that range later on in the draft? What would your approach be when it comes to these prospects?
If you're dead set on solidifying the interior, and for Bryce Young, that's a very viable argument to make. I know they paid 2 guards, Robert Hunt and who was the other guard?
Damian Lewis.
Yeah, that's right. Free agency. Like, if you want to complete that puzzle, right? I think the center position is just as important. Getting that chemistry with the QB, allowing him to step up in the pocket and be comfortable. I I think Zach Frazier is a very good investment at 33, and frankly, I really like the upside with Tanner Bortolini and Bo Lemmer. I really like the upside. I think Bortolini, I mean, that 3-cone, it was like 7.16.
Yeah.
Right? That's absurd. That's 99.9 percentile.
Yep.
So he's very agile, explosive. I think his visibility in the run game is really impressive. He still struggles with leveraging and absorbing power and pass protection. And Bo Limmer, kind of similar deal. I know he tested very athletically. I know he had high 30 bench reps too, which, I mean, to be fair, or to be critical, like bench press is not a perfect measure of play strength on the field.
Right.
So it's something to take into account too. But I think with Bo Limmer, you have a guy who's very good at playing square to the opponent, very athletic again on the lateral plane, but I think still needs to improve at kind of leveraging his base beneath him again to absorb power. I think that's one thing that both he and Bortolini can improve at, and that's the exact kind of issue that can shorten the runway for Bryce Young up the middle. So I look at Zach Frazier. Such a sound prospect. Like, he's definitely a top 50 guy for me, and I could easily see him sneaking in round 1 because he's just so good. He's just so good at everything. I hate to be so simplistic there, and I'm going to open the book a little bit because he's kind of a low cut guy, right? So he's not high cut. He's not super stiff in the hips. He's very flexible, but really athletic. Again, I think his football IQ and his leverage awareness as a former wrestler, state champion wrestler, is one of the things that really stands out on his tape the most. Like, he's so good again at aligning his base. Anchor placement, right? That grip strength, and then really good vision against stunts as well. Very good ankle IQ in the run game. There's not a lot of holes that you can poke in his game, and I think, if that injury wasn't hanging over his head, we could be talking about him as a first round guy. So I think if you're the Panthers, I definitely like the upside from Bortolini. But I think the gap is too big for me. If I was really dead set on getting a center, I would probably get Frazier at 33 and then maybe try and get a wide receiver at 39. And that's the good thing. Like, you can hit 2 of these positions, right? It's just a matter of which 2 you want to hit. And that's right.
Prioritizing and looking at depth of the positions later on in the draft. I love that you say you think it's too simplistic. One of my favorite parts with the evals is when I come across a guy that just looks the position, plays really well, and honestly, I walk away from it saying, I wish I didn't have to get into any kind of detail in that. Like, Zach Frazier just plays center. He looks like a center, and he does it well. That should be it for me. Like, it just makes sense. There's a guy later at defensive lineman that we'll talk about that does the same thing. Speaking of defense, let's get into a little bit of defense here. Let me go back to the beginning. This is a guy that you had pegged as a good fit. I believe he was actually in your latest mock draft that you did for Pro Football Network. I think that you had the Panthers selecting him in that mock draft. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Look at Alex.
There we go.
Now, who did Alex? Alex, who did he have us? Did he have us taking Isaac with pick 33, or did he
33, then Keon Coleman at 39?
Ooh, I would like that. That's a good scenario.
That would be very, very nice.
That would be a nice scenario, man. I'm not mad at that one bit. Thank you for doing that, Ian. So what do you like about Adisa Isaac specifically for the Panthers, but just in general as a prospect?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's tough because this edge class kind of falls off a little bit after the first round group. So that's one reason in that mock I prioritized him with 33 because I wasn't sure I'd be able to get him at 39 because there's a pretty big gap. But he's a top 50 guy for me too. I think just a really complete edge prospect. I think Chop Robinson, the upside is a little bit higher just because, come on, he's a blink off the line of scrimmage. He's got that speed to power element. He's a maniac. You can rush him from anywhere. So I really love the upside with Chop, but Adisa Isaac is probably, you can make an argument he's a little more complete because he's around 6'4", 250, 34-inch arms, really good profile, really good pursuit urgency and run defense. But then at the same time too, at the Senior Bowl, we saw that athleticism in action against premier prospect where he's exploding off the line. He's using that agility to offset and then capitalizing with double swipe grip moves, right? So you have a really complete edge prospect who I think in Ejiro Evero's scheme as a 3-4 outside linebacker, rush linebacker, you have a lot of appeal there because he can rush from space. He's explosive. He's got enough bend for you. He can leverage his burst into power, and he's just a really high motor guy too. So I think there's a fail-safe for him to be a successful defender. It's just the question is how successful can he be? But I think you're working with a high floor, high ceiling combination that frankly I'd really love to have in that edge room.
I don't have anything else to add to that. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. It's exactly what I think about him. I think that, we talked about the adversity that Xavier Legette had faced in his personal life and career and stuff like that. Isaac has a similar feel and trajectory as far as like some things that it holds close to him, right? And things that he plays for, and then the injuries that he's overcome to get back to where he is and put himself in this position. I mean, he's worked really hard to get back into this conversation, and it's a conversation that he deserves to be in. So I root for him, not just as a Panthers prospect, but as a prospect in general. This is the other guy when we were talking about Zach Frazier that just looks like the position that he plays. And like you watch him and you're like, yeah, no, I can see he's going to be a good football player because he's just big as hell and strong as hell and fast. Like this dude is built in a lab, right? Like honestly, he's 6'5", 285 pounds. I'm talking about Darius Robinson, the defensive line or the edge from Missouri, depending on how you categorize him. And I don't even know that it's fair to categorize this guy, man. Like, honestly, I've got it on here. Like, pick your poison. Like, line him up anywhere along the line, even on the outside, if you want to put him all the way on the outside technique and let him go. And the thing, I don't know that he necessarily has a natural speed and bend to excel there, but you can put him there, right? Darius Robinson is a guy I'm very intrigued by if he's there at 33 because of that versatility. I don't know from a pure pass rush, right? Like strictly from getting after the quarterback. Is he the same type of prospect that you could have in Adisa Isaac? Or are you looking at this a little bit more of saying, hey, look, worst case scenario, right? You've got a really stout defender who can also generate vertical pressure from the interior of the defensive line. Your thoughts on Darius Robinson?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dichotomy for Panthers fans. Like, I think the projection for Isaac is that 3-4 outside linebacker, rush linebacker who can, rush the passer for 2-point stances in Evero's scheme. I think that projection is a little easier to make. With Darius Robinson, you don't know exactly what you're getting here because he can rush from 7-tech. He can play 5-tech and set that strong side edge on running downs. He can play 3-tech and explode inside the interior. Right. So I think there's a lot of versatility with him. But is he a master of all or a master of none? Right. And I think for him, there is still a little bit of room to refine his counter arsenal past initial power. I think he's still improving at that. I don't think he has the high end bend capacity that other guys do. I do think for his size, he does have very good bend, though. I think the ankle flexion that shows up when he's prying past blocks and reducing his surface area. There's some freaky reps where he's able to bend under the arc from his time at edge at Missouri in 2023. So I do think that upside is there. I think you're still fleshing out the pass rushing arsenal past initial power. He's got great push-pull moves. He's got great bull rush. And he does have some rips in his arsenal too. But, again, I think the consistency is what I think at his maximum. I would want to utilize him as kind of a Danico Autry type, kind of that alignment versatile goblin who can play 3-tech, 4-eye, 5-tech, 7-tech, really wherever you want based on situational factors. But he's got that speed to power from outside alignments too. So I think there's a lot of different ways to use him. If you want the safer, the clearer projection, Adisa Isaac or someone else would make sense. But if you're willing to bank on the alignment versatility with Darius Robinson, that Danico Autry impact is what I can see him providing at his maximum. I think that's what you're working with for CeeLane.
Yeah, I think we agree on a lot of that too, because when you talk about like for his size, he obviously has some good bend, but that's for his size, right? Like it's all contextual. And that's what we have right here on the graphic too. The first one, the plus for him is that he's really big, right? Like he's giant, he's strong, he's got long arms. But then the first negative on this is he's really big. Because and that might be confusing. You might think that I made like an error there with the graphic, but like really, I mean, his size does limit a little bit of that natural athleticism and bend on the outside. So it just depends on which thing you prioritize. Alex, if you had to pick today, if you let's say you're going to draft an edge player, right? You're going to take a pass rusher or a defensive lineman at 33. You going Isaac or you going Robinson?
I just think Isaac's. I feel like we already have a guy that's sort of. I don't want to say project. I'm talking about DJ Johnson. I just would rather have somebody that's a clear position guy. So I'd rather have Isaac. I don't know if you're going to talk about Nealon, but one of those guys first. I'm not saying I would draft Nealon at 33, but I'm saying that sort of profile. You already had. Okay, you did.
Look at that.
But yeah, I'd rather have that than just. I just don't know where he plays in Evero's system. I don't like. I just don't know. I don't know.
as much as I like Darius Robinson, and I like him a lot. Don't get me wrong; he's actually higher on my board than Isaac is by a slight margin. I would prefer Isaac for the Panthers just because you just traded Brian Burns. You really don't have an edge presence. I want a guy who I know I can rely on the edge, and that's a decent Isaac.
I mean, DJ Wanham, the guy that they just signed to kind of come in and I guess is the de facto edge one right now. I mean, he's coming off of a torn quad, right? He's not even ready to play right now. So, I mean, we've got just question marks there. That I think that's got to be.
And he's more of a situational pass rusher.
For sure, man.
A lot of his sack production came
clean up.
Clean up, exactly. So you're still
100%
in a rotation.
Not that he doesn't give good effort. Like, I don't want to make it sound like he's just like fortunate that he like fell ass first into his 8 sacks. But like, it was a lot of like right time, right place, like keep on going, not necessarily one-on-one winning. I do wonder about Marshawn Nealon because we've had a top 30 visit with him. The Panthers have. And I really like him, man. Like this guy is tenacious. He's strong. I've got an affinity for edges that can win with power. Because I feel like there's like a base floor there with that, right? That they're always going to have a value. Maybe they're not your premier pass rusher, but Marshawn Nealon shows that tenacity and the effort that I think that he can actually become a little bit more of a pass rusher in the NFL than what he maybe showed at Western Michigan. What do you think about Marshawn Nealon? And now this should be in your wheelhouse here as a Michigan guy, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Western Michigan, man. He was one of those guys who his tape is a lot of fun to watch because you'll see him on the edge, and that's where he played at the Senior Bowl and kind of got his name out there on the map. Mm-hmm. Western Michigan, he played a lot on the edge too, but there are reps where they'll shade him over zero tech, kind of like lined up like an off-ball linebacker. Yeah. He'll just use his speed to power to function as a battering ramp and just kind of blast back the interior line. So the speed to power is definitely the prime selling point with him. 6'3", 267, 34.5-inch arms. With that kind of natural leverage, proportional length, and the explosion that he has, that's a picture-perfect power profile. So you have a guy who can generate that displacement at the drop of a hat. The trade-off with him, not the most bendy guy. The hips are a little stiff. He's not really great at rolling his midsection through blocks. So I don't think you have that finesse element with him nearly as much as you would with a guy like Isaac. So that's kind of the trade-off. The motor is hot, though. I do think he flashes the ability to stack additional counters off of initial power. So I think there is that to him too. I would prefer him at 67 if you're going to take him, or maybe trade back in round 2 with that second pick if you want. Try and play the board. 39 would be a little rich for me, but I think the speed to power is a thing that you can rely on for him to at least make an impact early in his career.
Yep, I would.
Hot motor too.
I think if I wanted, or if I was the Panthers and I wanted to take Marshawn Nealon, I think that I would be looking at 65, where I would be looking at him, so that I could fill that 33 and 39. If I wanted to go center with a Zach Frazier, if he's still on the board, I take Zach Frazier there. Then I take a wide receiver, and then I have my pick between corner or edge, at 65, so that you can kind of fill in those positions. And it should still be best player available. You don't want to just limit yourself to certain positions, but there is a weighted best player available strategy that I think is the best for the Panthers. Because we do just have giant glaring holes on the roster that you've got to fill, and there are good players in these positions. This one is one, Alex, I think you and I have talked about Ben Sinnott a few times because we've been talking about the tight end room and how we just really want to improve that room. Tommy Tremble got a nice vote of confidence. Talking about they really see an upside with Tommy Tremble. And look, we've talked about Tremble really well the past year that we've covered the Panthers, and I like him a lot. I don't know that I necessarily want to go into the season with him as tight end 1 and be banking on that. Ben Sinnott is a guy that I really like. He's my tight end 2. I don't want, again, man, I hate this thing that we've already talked about, this recency with Thompson things. But when you really look at him, if you took the Kansas State helmet off and put an Iowa Hawkeyes helmet on, I think he'd be getting a whole lot more praise because of their success in Iowa, right, of developing tight ends for guys that aren't necessarily focal points of the offense, because nobody is the focal point of an offense in Iowa. Their defense is the focal point of the offense in Iowa. But if you just looked at him in comparison from a production standpoint, the guy started playing fullback, right? And then he got a little bit more incorporated into the game. The coach obviously knew at that point, was like, look, this dude's got something to him. Slightly undersized. So the question was, when he came into the combines, what was he going to measure in at? There was questions about that. He came at 6'4", 250. I think that's terrific size for him. And he still ran a 4.68 in the 40. He had great explosive numbers, 40-inch vertical. I think his broad jump was really good. I'm pretty high on him. Shorter arms, So like, yeah, if you want to talk about like the apex catch point type of deal, he's not going to be your Jimmy Graham, like a Theo Johnson type of prospect, right? That he's got the long arms and the reach and he's an immediate red zone threat because of that. But Ben Sinnott has the agility, I think, to be a 3-level route runner. I think that he's still kind of finding his footing in that regard of being a weapon in the pass game. What do you think about Ben Sinnott?
I like him a lot, man. He was one who I watched in the summer, and he graded out as my tight end 2 over Sanders then. And I was thinking to myself, like, not a lot of people are talking about him. Am I not barking up the right tree? And it's like, I'm going to trust what I see. And I liked him even more after 2023, and then he tested the way he did. You know, I know people, again, I hate successive year comps, but the similarities to Sam Laporta, you know, I think he's a guy who, you know, again, you mentioned it, he started as an H-back, right? And you can use him as an H-back, but he can play big slot, in line, out wide, and he can run routes over the middle. I think the way that Laporta was so successful in year 1, again, Ben Johnson scheming him open was a big thing, but Laporta could also run a number of routes over the middle. And I think his best thing, the one thing that stood out to me when I watched Laporta, and I undervalued him last year, was that, you know, he definitely had that smooth, functional athleticism that didn't, like, you know, it kind of caught you off guard when he tested the way he did because it's so effortlessly implanted into his game. Sinnott's kind of the same way for me. You know that 40-inch vertical, you don't always see it to the level that Brock Bowers explodes in space on tape, but it's so well interwoven, you know, functionally. And I think that's one thing that stands out. The 6'7", 8'3" cone as well. Or I think it was around 6'8", something well below 7. So it shows that agility, that change of direction. That stands out too. I think the reason that Laporta was so successful in his first year in Ben Johnson's offense is that he can just carve open through zones in the middle of the field and then use that play strength to convert and, you know, occasionally a cool rack if needed when given the opportunity. Ben Sinnott, to me, is a guy who can be weaponized in a similar way, where he has a full route tree, he can separate at stems, and he's got strong hands, and he can work over the middle, he can work in contested situations, and he's got some rack utility too. And then if you want him to block, he can block from H-back as well. So I think, you know, just a guy who you can integrate on day one, and he can separate, he can catch, he can do rack, really complete profile, who has that functional athleticism to underpin it. I think that's the good thing. The athleticism isn't the headline with him.
Yes.
It's the module through which everything else is channeled. And I think that's the fun part about him because there are so many more good things to his tape. I think he has legit tight end 1 potential. And I think he's tremendously slept on. I'm excited to see where he falls on my final board because I could see him being a top 64 guy for sure, maybe a top 50.
That's I think the curious part for me is that you run like the simulators and stuff, right? PFF, man, you can get him. Maybe even Pro Football Network. I don't know because I do it in such a different way. I'm drafting him at 65 almost every time anyways because I want him on my draft. But I've seen him at like 140, 141, 142. And I'm just like, I would be shocked if NFL guys actually looked at Ben Sinnott and thought that he was a 4th or 5th round pick. That just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But I do like, and you mentioned his rack abilities. It's not so much that he's going to run away from anybody, but neither was Sam Laporta, right? Like he's got the functional strength and agility enough that he's going to be able to make a move, make a defender miss, and then he goes and he'll try to run through a rest of the arm tackles on his way out, right? I think that's just a very similar play style. Real quick, let's finish it up with a couple of defensive backs. This is my cornerback 5, Max Melton. I'm really high on him. The Panthers have a serious need to implement some talent in the cornerback room right now. I think it is J.C. Horn, Dane Jackson, and Alex Bryant are the 3 starters that we have right now.
Troy Hill, baby, let's go.
Troy Hill. No, I'm kidding. I like Troy Hill a lot, man. I like Troy. Troy definitely is more of a nickel. That is where he's going to be. He's going to be the slot corner. So outside, I know that Dane Jackson did an admirable job, I guess, at times filling in Buffalo. I just don't know that he projects as your cornerback 2 that you should feel really, really comfortable about. Maybe in a zone coverage is a much better place for him than in a press man system, which Evero does tend to run more zone concepts than man. He even did that in Denver, even with Surtain and the allotment of riches that he had in the secondary there. Max Melton, though, is a guy that I think has that versatility inside out. Honestly, he could even play safety in a jam. I feel like he's a ridiculous athlete. His testing showed all of that, but it's on the film too, man. He's got great length, recovery, speed to make up for if he gets beat initially. What do you like about Max Melton?
Yeah, the profile. I think he measured in with 32-inch arms, combine, if I'm not mistaken, at 5'11", which is really appealing because you look at 5'11", right? You know, that's
Tiny bit short.
Yeah, at the corner. But here's the thing: at the corner position, you do reach a point of diminishing returns when you get to like 6'2" or 6'3". Usually, those guys aren't as fluid with their change of direction, and that can cause them to get a step behind at stems. Right? Guys like Sauce Gardner don't come around very often, right? You know, and even guys like Tariq Woolen, like his recovery speed makes up for some deficiencies in the hip sync, right? So you look at a guy like Max Melton. 5'11", so he's really natural at sinking and swiveling his hips and redirecting. Then 32-inch arms is around 70 percentile, I think, for arm length in the corners. So he's got that length too. So he can redirect, he can swivel, and he can get inside your frame too, and he can disrupt the catch point. So I think you have the boons of a taller and a shorter corner in one. So it's kind of a cool combination prospect. And then that 4.39 long speed. I mean, the dude is crazy explosive. He accelerates instantly. You don't need to worry about vertical separation with him, and then he's got that twitch and that twist speed to realign and kind of stay square to guys as well. So I really like the physical profile with him. I think one comparison that kind of stood out to me when I was exploring one for him, because he's my CB6, I believe. I'm very high on him too. He's a top 50 guy for me.
I like it.
But Robert Alford, who played for the Falcons a little bit, he was a ball hawk in his time, man. But Robert Alford was a guy who was like 5'11", 32-inch arms, 4.3, high 4.3 speed. That's a really good physical profile to have because you can match guys, but then you can also get inside the frame and man up when you need to. And then you have the recovery speed to close gaps and zone coverage as well. So really good profile to have, I think.
I like the potential fit with Evero too, man, because Evero really does his thing in that secondary with the concepts and his coverages. That's really where he makes his bones, right? Like he's not known as much for the pressure generating and stuff like that for his defense. It's a lot more about those back end coverages concepts that really he thrives in. Speaking of tall corners and kind of capping out, this is a guy that I also really like, man. And I brought these two up because I think that Melton. Look, I'd be comfortable spending 33 or 39 on Max Melton, to be completely honest. I think that there's value in him as a prospect at that slot. Maybe it's rich, maybe 65 is a better fit. It depends on where it fits. But Kyrie Jackson is a guy that I really don't know, man. Is he going to be at 65? Is he going to be there at 140? Is he going to be at 101? I think that he's got a much larger range as far as where he could go because of the way that teams can view him. But it's hard to deny how good he does look on film. He's a pest, man. Like he's such a long arm, long body, tall dude that can also stay close enough with receivers, carry receivers, stay close to their body, and really just annoy the crap out of them, right? And make them feel contained. But then he also has the ball skills to make good plays on the ball. He's clearly a boundary guy, which I also do find appealing, man. I love versatility, but I also like it when a guy has a position and that's a position that he plays and he knows that, so he just focuses and excels at that position. So I like that aspect about Kyrie Jackson. He plays a little bit undisciplined sometimes. But again, that doesn't bother me all that much when you're talking about a potential 4th or 5th round investment, maybe a 3rd if you trade back. What is your read on Kyrie Jackson? Do you think he would be a good fit in Carolina?
Yeah, I think he could be. I think, whenever you run more zone concepts, having a long strider like him who can chew up ground, but then also enforce the catch point when he needs to is a really good balance to have. I think he can play man if you want him to. I think he does have better than average fluidity for a taller guy. I think when I was watching him, his hinge fluidity at the line, when he's idle in his stance and kind of jamming guys and then diverting upfield vertically, he can transition 90 degrees and go to full speed pretty quickly in those situations. So I really like that part of his profile. And then I do think he has, like you said, the wingspan to impact the ball at the catch point. He's got pretty good awareness in zone. It can run a little hot and cold sometimes, undisciplined, like you said. I think there is room for him to kind of refine that part of his game. But again, the size speed element that you're working with is really appealing. I think looking at the draft range, 65 would be rich. I also am not sure he'd be there at 140. I think between those two picks is kind of your sweet spot for him. Early day 3 if he's there. I think that's a good range to bank on the tools because, as you said, you have Troy Hill in the slot. You have J.C. Horn. If he can stay healthy, I liked him a lot as a prospect. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So hoping we get a clean bill of health this year. But if you have those two guys in a set spot, getting Kyrie Jackson with his length and competitiveness on the other side, that could be a good investment for you. And he's got the thing with bigger guys in zone coverage, they have such a wide disruption radius that can dissuade quarterbacks from throwing their way, as well as they're well positioned, right? So, that's kind of a fun element too. I think there's some projection, a little more projection involved with him than other guys, but the tools are really enticing. That really,
and I love the idea too of, man, imagine this though, you're an opposing quarterback, right? And you got JC Horn over there on the one side, and you're like, man, I don't want to throw over there. Yeah. Then you look over and you got Kyrie Jackson over on the other side. You're like, what the hell am I going to do with the football right now? Like, just hand it off, man. Give it to Bijan Robinson every single time. As Ian Hardett says, let's add Bijan Robinson to this offense and see what happens. All right. Well, look, that was awesome. That ran through everything. Alex, did you get what you wanted out of that? Because I know that this is really your thing.
Oh, yeah. I love going really deep into profiles.
This is your forte, right?
Once you get to like 45, I don't know what you're talking about.
See, man, there's just something so interesting to me, though, man, about the depth of knowledge that it takes to maintain all of these things in your head. And Ian, you were just like rapid fire with everything. You were so comfortable and familiar with it all. I'm just very impressed with you, man. Thank you for taking the time to sit here and go over all this stuff with us. If you ever get bored and you want to do like 5 more episodes, I will completely pick you up on it, and we could do mock drafts all day. I pretty much sit there on your site like 3 times a day and run a mock draft just to kind of see how it goes. Real quick before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find all your stuff, man.
Yeah, you can follow me at IC_draft on Twitter or X. Now I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I don't care.
Always.
It's still Twitter for me, but IC_draft. Any draft questions you have, feel free to hit me up. Try to be responsive. You can follow my content at Pro Football Network at PFN365. We have more draft content coming in the final month, and we're going to start rolling into 2025 as soon as we can too. So going to be a lot more projection involved there, but it's a constant process. It never stops, and it's part of the grind. We live for it. So I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking about these prospects, and the Panthers are one team. I think Dave Canales, things are looking up with him. I think if you put the right offensive pieces around Bryce Young, if you start to reinfuse that defense, you could at least take some steps in the right direction in 2024.
I like it, man. The last thing that I'll request of you is that when you do your next mock draft, just really think about Jalen Polk, man. Like, just
always thinking about him.
I know, man. I know it. Me too. Even if it's just as a personal favor, just one time, just like pick somebody else, put them right in there. But I would have took Jalen Polk.
I'll make sure for sure.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man. We're gonna let you get up out of here, and then Alex now finishes off. Ian Cummings, everybody.
No, we don't do the clapping anymore.
You know what I messed up, man? I didn't have the clapping stuff on today.
Oh yeah, so I looked like stupid the first time I did it. There we go. Yeah. When you had him on, I was like, oh, I was doing like a silent clap, like
a little late, but dude, he deserves the round of applause.
Yeah.
Money. I see. I've got all these sound effects now, right? But when I was talking, man, I was so caught up in talking draft prospects. I mean, that's my thing, dude. Like. Honestly, I sit here and like I would be having dinner with my family, and they're like, talking about how your day was, and I was like, oh man, it was a hellish kind of day. I really was like in my 7th game of watching Jalen Polk, and I really just don't know how to get him any lower than 6. Like, I'm getting ridiculed online, but I just can't move him off. Yeah, that was a lot of fun for me.
Oh yeah.
So we got to do this. No, go for it.
Yeah, especially when you don't have me that knows anything and he knows everything, so it's perfect.
You probably just had like one of the best learning experiences you could have when it comes to these prospects, man. I mean, like the way that he breaks everything down, man, is just, it's a science with it, right? And there's just a deeper understanding and knowledge than any of us common folk might have about it.
Yeah, and the whole time I'm just looking at our top 30 visits and being, how many receivers are we looking at, how many edges are we and then just like that, I'm calculating that kind of stuff versus actual player profiles.
Right. So look, we got to figure out our schedule for next week. I'm on spring break, the school system here at spring break, so we're taking the kid to the beach. So I don't know what I will have availability wise, but we'll talk about it and see. But until then, we'll have this out tomorrow. Today is Tuesday, so we should have this out on Wednesday. That gives everybody maybe you watch it for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then we come back and do another episode. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, we're just. I mean, unless which I do still saying that there's gonna be one more big move. But other than that, I think it's be kind of like just the same thing until the draft actually happens.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But hey, who knows? Maybe not.
Yeah. There's gonna be one move. There's gonna be one move, but
one big move is what Alex is banking on. Let's find out if
all
it's right.
Mid to big move. One starter.
No. Say it with your
semi-big.
Big move. It's a big move.
Well, we've already kind of done some big moves. So I'm saying like this.
They reached out to Stephon Gilmore. That's a relatively big name, right?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that when you were talking about corners. I was like, there's plenty of corners still on the market that are looking for jobs. Xavier Howard, like Adoree Jackson, like there's freaking Patrick Peterson is out there, and he actually had a pretty decent year last year. So there's a lot of corners out there. So I think that one of those. So say we get Clowney, we're probably not taking Isaac. Like that's going to matter a lot of what we do in the first 3 picks, I think.
No doubt.
But so this is just fun until that one big move happens.
Yeah, man, we're getting close to time, and you know what?
T. Higgins?
Oh, no. Out of here. God, he's not like Frank right now, smelling all this optimism.
I know. I was so mad about Justin Simmons. I'm glad we did get a safety, but I was thinking it was going to be Justin Simmons. Oh well.
Jordan Fuller's a good ball player, man.
He's way cheaper, so it's a good move.
That's it.
Because they're holding money for someone else.
There it is again. Man, what a teaser. He just wants to keep on trying to bring you back with this big move thing.
You heard him say it too. He was like, we had a good meeting with Clowney and others.
Yeah.
Eyebrow raise.
Tune in 2 weeks to find out if Alex is still doing this or if he has officially given up all hope. I appreciate everybody for listening today. This was a good one, man. I enjoyed this one a lot. A lot of good information. And you know what? We'll see if we can't get some other people on to talk a little bit more draft before we reach the big day, April 25th. And really, for the Panthers, it's the Panthers. It's April 26th because we don't got anything on that first day. But we'll figure that out.
Unless we trade into the first round.
Oh, come on, man! You with these teasers, man. It's just crazy. It's lunacy.
I'm not gonna lie to you. You're talking about Xavier Worthy. I really want us to trade in the first round and get Worthy. I think that I've been talking about this, but we need that one explosion player and just like short quarterback, short receiver, Steve Smith kind of feel. Like
it would be really exciting to have a guy with his speed and dynamic, right?
He ain't getting past Kansas City though. There ain't no way.
And I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if he was even there for Kansas City. But
I'm saying, like, he's not going to get to us if we don't trade into the first round.
Yep. I hit you with the music box. This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys, everybody, for watching. Until next time, Nobody Show.